While most of us use our social media accounts to keep in touch with friends and family members, it has in recent times become a valuable tool in law enforcement, as ever more criminals are being tracked down thanks to their activity on sites like Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. In many of these cases, people have incriminated themselves by posting videos or photos of their crimes, and unsurprisingly, it doesn't take long before they're apprehended in order to serve time in prison. Keeping a low profile isn't easy in this day and age, since CCTV security cameras monitor most of our movements away from home, and this is something that must weigh heavily on the minds of most wanted fugitives. Then there's often the chance that a reward is being offered for their capture, which makes it even harder to hide away, since their faces would have been shown on flyers, on TV, and even on social media sites. However, the lure of living a normal life must also be tempting, and hence many criminals make the mistake of divulging their whereabouts while they're still being sought, whether they mean to or not, and it sometimes leads to their arrest. One way that some criminals attempt to stay out of sight is to travel to a different country, where they're less likely to be recognized, and once they've made it across borders, it's easier to lay low. But some fugitives become overconfident when they think that they're safe, and this has led to many of them being arrested. One example being an Italian man named Michele Grasso, who was wanted in Sicily in 2010. The police discovered that Grasso was dealing in illegal substances, and subsequently a warrant for his arrest was issued. But before it could be served, he decided to flee to England, where he was virtually unknown. It was a good ploy, and he would have remained at large for some time if it weren't for his inability to stay off of his social media profiles. He even went as far as to mock the authorities, stating that his home address was Alcatraz. He then used Facebook to keep in touch with his family and friends back in Italy, informing them that he was having a great time, on one occasion posting a photo of himself with a snowman, along with the caption, "Have you seen how beautiful it is here in the snow?" He then revealed that he was spending Christmas in London and added photos of himself visiting the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, posing with statues of David Beckham and Tom Cruise. Despite his insistence that he was doing well, his friends were clearly still worried about him, as one urged him to let them know where he was in case the authorities caught up with him. It isn't known whether or not he did so, but he continued to post about his time in England, including photos of himself at the Ministry of Sound Club, Oxford Circus, and London Eye and Tower Bridge. He celebrated his 24th birthday while still in England, and to celebrate, he added a photo of himself with his arm around an unknown woman. His court case went ahead without him back in Italy, but in his absence, he was sentenced to 5 years behind bars and ordered to pay a fine of £24,000, which is about $25,700. This seemed to have little effect on his online activity, as he then posted photos of himself hard at work in a pizza restaurant. In the photo, he could be seen working in the kitchen, and he even added photos of the restaurant's exterior. He also gave the eatery's name. Italian police started working with Interpol to have Grasso extradited, noting that he'd last posted that he was attending a party in Waltham Abbey, and soon they formulated a plan that was named Operation Big Ben. Before long, Grasso was tracked down and arrested, largely thanks to his strange decision to give away his whereabouts just about everywhere he went. He was brought back to Italy and was last known to be held in prison in the capital, Rome. Grasso is a reminder to other criminals that they can be tracked down and taken into custody no matter where they flee to. And in most cases, it's only a matter of time before they'll have to face the consequences of their actions. Most criminals who have a fear of being caught do their utmost to avoid being seen in public after they've carried out their crime, since they could easily be recognized and handed over to the police. But sometimes, it seems some criminals find it almost impossible to keep quiet about their misdeeds, and more often than not, this leads to their downfall. And in one case that took place in Washington, they're branded as some of the dumbest criminals to ever live. This is exactly what happened to 19-year-old Rodney Knight Jr., when he decided that crime was the perfect career choice, even at such a young age. But soon enough, his hubris got the better of him, and his future now looks a lot less bright. In December of 2010, Knight targeted a home that he would eventually rob, but he couldn't have known that the house belonged to a Washington Post journalist called Mark Fisher, and that he would soon prove to be his own worst enemy. What followed has left many people dumbfounded, as Knight seemingly would have gotten away with this crime, but decided that he needed to boast about what he had done, a delusion that he soon regretted. That December, Knight broke into the Fisher home and helped himself to several of their personal belongings, which included a winter coat, $400 in cash, and 2 laptops, one of which belonged to Fisher's 15-year-old son. It was later determined that Knight made it into the house by kicking in the basement door while the family wasn't home. He strolled through the house, deciding what he wanted to steal, immediately putting on a winter coat that he had found. He then went to Fisher's son's room and found cash on his desk along with a laptop. Not satisfied with stealing other people's hard-earned possessions, he then decided to rub salt into the wound by taunting the family. He opened the laptop and took a photo of himself holding the cash that he had just taken. He then opened Fisher's son's Facebook page and uploaded the photo to his profile for the entire world to see, with his face and some of the stolen items clearly visible. The coat that he could be seen wearing had just been delivered to Fisher, and it was still in the Macy's box when Knight happened upon it. It seemed that Knight had sealed his own fate, but it would take more than a month for officers to track him down and take him into custody. Fisher added that while the investigation was ongoing, he was told by a police officer that Knight had to be the dumbest criminal he'd ever seen, and most people who read about the story in the media tend to agree. During his arrest, Knight was found to be in possession of a loaded firearm, and it was soon determined that he had no license for such a weapon. He pleaded guilty to carrying a firearm without a license and second-degree burglary. He was ultimately sentenced to serve 44 months behind bars. It's one thing for a criminal to taunt his victims after carrying out a crime, but quite another to taunt the police officers who are looking to arrest you. And yet, some criminals seem unable to resist the urge, despite knowing that it severely increases their chances of being caught. 28-year-old Londoner Craig Lynch, known to his friends as Lazy, received the moniker the Facebook Bandit after he started posting about his life outside of prison, after he managed to escape in 2009. At the time, Lynch was serving time in Suffolk after he was found guilty of aggravated burglary. But at some point during his incarceration, he managed to escape, and he soon gained a massive following on social media. He set up a Facebook page after fleeing from prison, and soon he had as many as 40,000 people following his posts and waiting to see what message he would send next to the police, though many urged him to hand himself over to the authorities, calling his actions childish and stupid. But most of his followers enjoyed watching him taunt the police, with a few even writing a song about him and creating t-shirts in his honor. While many people thought he was truly daring to escape from jail, it was later revealed that this was no impressive feat, since the prison where he was being held was a converted college with minimal security. One Suffolk Constabulary spokesperson stated that it was pretty much seen as an open prison from which inmates could virtually just walk out. In one post, Lynch reiterated that he would not be handing himself over to the authorities, since he didn't feel he needed to do their job for them. He then added that police officers get paid to do their job, and so he would leave it up to them to find him. He then jokingly asked if any of his Facebook followers had a cannon that he could use since he wanted to fire himself over the Atlantic Ocean. He also posted several photos of himself. In one, he could be seen holding a cooked turkey in one hand while making an obscene gesture towards the camera. The tinsel around his neck and shoulders made it clear that this was around Christmas time. The photo was accompanied by a message to his followers, in which he stated that to all of those who doubted that he had actually escaped, the turkey should serve as enough proof, since it would be impossible for him to obtain such a nice bird while still incarcerated. In another photo, he could be seen holding up a wanted sign, clearly taunting the police once more. But officers appealed to members of the public to come forward with details on his whereabouts if they knew where he was hiding out. Hundreds of people sent messages of encouragement, while several went to the effort of reminding them that Lynch was a criminal who needed to serve time for what he'd been sentenced to. For 4 months after his escape, Lynch kept updating the page with meals that he was eating and further taunts. But his antics would eventually lead to his downfall when he was tracked down by the Metropolitan Police in Kent. Upon his arrest, he stated that he'd watched a New Year's Eve fireworks display in London just 2 weeks prior. He was sent back to prison after an additional 6 months of jail time were tacked on to his sentence. When a criminal is tracked down thanks to social media, it's usually because they've been recognized by someone they know, or by one of their victims who's easily able to remember what they look like. But in an ever-growing number of cases, the public and investigators only have to sit back and wait, since some criminals have the knack to give themselves away, even when there's a minimal chance that they'll ever be caught. In a case that took place in Florida in 2016, 3 men, including 18-year-old Redarius Glenn Collins and 27-year-old Marcus Terrell Parker, ended up on the wrong side of the law when they decided to rob a house located in Pinecrest on the 27th of May. The pair managed to flee with a safe, and inside they discovered a lot of jewelry that they then sold to a fence who operated from a local mall. But this transaction gives us an insight into how little the three knew about their own profession, since the jewels were worth around $500,000, but they decided to sell it to their fence for a measly $3,900 or $1,300 each. It's likely that they didn't know how much the jewelry was actually worth, and judging by their behavior after the fact, they were overjoyed with the amount that they were given as Collins started talking about it on his social media profiles. Making the strange decision to let the world know that he'd just committed a robbery, he posted to Facebook, adding a video of himself and the third accomplice while holding up $100 bills and adding the caption, "We got a safe." Strangely, he then admitted that they'd stolen $500,000 worth of items and then sold it for a paltry amount, which most people think would have been better to keep to himself, since this is hardly something to boast about. It would later be revealed by investigators that the safe's contents were sold along with around $10,000 worth of other items that had been pilfered from another house during a different robbery. It didn't take long for authorities to become aware of the posts, and from there it was an easy task to track Collins and Parker down before placing them in custody. They admitted to committing the crime, since they'd all but confessed on Facebook, and their fates were sealed. Investigators then had the laborious task of tracking the stolen goods down, and most of the jewelry was found at a Southland Mall store called Zodium Jewelry and Watch. Each of the men's houses and vehicles were then searched, and more stolen items were recovered. The safe was found where they disposed of it at Southwest 224th Street and 115th Avenue. Strangely, Collins decided to plead not guilty to the charges against him and Parker, which included dealing in stolen property, grand theft, criminal mischief, and burglary. Speaking to one of the victims of the robberies, they told the media that they still felt violated and on edge since their privacy had been invaded, and they felt that they had no foolproof way of securing their home and possessions. The third suspect has not been tracked down, and they remain wanted by the police, who urged anyone with information on his whereabouts to contact the Miami-Dade Crime Stop. Fraud cases are usually a complicated matter, since they usually require investigators to follow a long paper trail that eventually leads to the guilty party being identified. But some cases are made much easier by the fraudsters themselves, when they're unable to stick to the lie that they fabricated. One such criminal is a man named Andy Airy, who hails from Bristol, England. In 2015, he was the unfortunate victim of a traffic collision while he was cycling to work one morning, and as a result, he was unable to work for a while. He stated that one of his knees had been badly injured in the incident, and the driver of the vehicle that hit him admitted that he was in the wrong. Luckily, he was insured when Airy announced that he would be claiming around $76,000 in compensation, stating that he had experienced pain and suffering and loss of income, and had to pay for his medical expenses, and registered as handicapped on the open labor market. The case seemed to be an open and shut matter, but the driver's insurance company asked a law firm to investigate the claims made by Airy, since they were set to pay out a lot of money as a result of the accident. This prompted the law firm's fraud intelligence department to start looking into Airy's life following the incident, and what they found was rather surprising, especially when delving into his social media accounts. They decided to compare posts from before and after the collision, since it was known that he was a keen cyclist. It was also known that he was examined by a doctor who confirmed the problems with his knee. But Airy had betrayed himself on his social media pages. 4 weeks before undergoing the examination, he posted that he'd completed a 10-mile run, and just 2 weeks later, he took part in a 62-mile ride on his bike. On the day that he underwent the examination, he completed a 20-mile bike ride, and 7 weeks later, he rode another 102 miles, which would not have been possible if he was as badly injured as he claimed. This evidence was brought to the same doctor who had examined him earlier, and he was of the opinion that the knee injury was a pre-existing condition that was likely degenerative rather than caused by the accident. When Airy was confronted with his diagnosis, he decided it would be better to drop his claim, but the law firm decided to pursue charges against him since they believed he had intentionally attempted to gain money from his pre-existing condition by claiming that he'd been injured in the accident. A hearing was held at a court in Bristol, and a judge agreed that he'd been intentionally deceitful in order to play the system for his own benefit. He was ordered to pay the motorist's cost, which totaled around $506,000. One of the firm's spokespeople stated that they would not have been able to uncover Airy's dishonest claim if it weren't for the fact that he was posting about his activities on Facebook. Another added that these types of fraudulent claims are all too common, and that they've been able to solve a number of cases in the same manner, thanks to posts made to social media pages. Law enforcement officers in Cincinnati have recently started concentrating on the social media profiles of suspected and known criminals, after they learned that there's a trend where they enjoy bragging about their crimes online. Captain Daniel Gerard has stated that his department received a crash course in mining social media pages for information, after consulting with a 22-year-old woman who knew more about Facebook than they did, and their efforts soon started paying off. But they discovered that these criminals were not just talking about crimes that they'd already committed, but often discussed deals involving illegal substances and other crimes that they were planning to commit. In some of those cases, they even provided the police with all the evidence they needed in the form of photos and videos. One example of this is a case that took place in 2008, when a man named Ronnie Tienda Jr. was accused of ending another man's life outside of a Texas nightclub in a gang-related incident. After evidence was found on his MySpace page, investigators used his own social media page against him in court, and he was found guilty. In cases where a criminal has taken steps to protect their posts from public viewing, investigators often visit their friends' pages in case they posted messages to their timelines, and this has also proven fruitful in the past. In other cases, they have to get a little more creative, since dealers in illegal goods will often post messages in code, but they're sometimes tracked down when these messages are deciphered, leading the police right to them. There have been a few cases where victims of a crime have been asked to look through several Facebook profiles, and in a few cases, they've been able to identify the perpetrators easily, since their photos are easy to find and view. Another clever tactic for an investigator is to create a fake profile and then befriend the subject in order to glean as much information from them as possible. Though it should be noted that Facebook doesn't approve of this practice, since they feel that it undermines the site's security and integrity. But there is, however, no law against creating such a profile, and all Facebook can do is find those accounts and disable them. When this is done, any evidence gathered from the site is also admissible in court. In one case that played out in Cincinnati, the police and the University of Cincinnati's Institute of Crime Science undertook a 9-month investigation in order to identify members of a notorious gang that was engaging in illegal activities, and Facebook was their primary source. Together, they created a database that included the police record of known criminals, as well as their phone records. This information was then analyzed by specialist software that was able to create links between the people who were being investigated. Officers were trained by social media experts, and before long, they realized just how many criminals were talking about their illegal activities online. Following a thorough investigation, they were able to identify 71 people who were associated with the gang, and they were all taken into custody, earning them the International Association of Chiefs of Police Award for excellence in criminal investigations. A similar case played out in New York, leading to the arrest of members of a gang in East Harlem, who were found to be involved in illegal arms trafficking. While most people use their social media profiles as a form of entertainment and to keep in touch with their loved ones, there have been many instances where criminals use them for nefarious purposes. In some cases, they'll use these sites to meet people in their area and then arrange to meet with them. But that's when things take a sinister turn, as they lie in wait for their victim before robbing them of their possessions. Luckily, this usually leaves a trail of evidence behind, and investigators can use that information to track the culprits down, which is what happened to Connor LeMedieu, a 22-year-old man from Delray Beach in Florida in 2016. After a robbery took place at a mobile gas station located at 3199 South Federal Highway, investigators took to Facebook to ask anyone with information to come forward, and before long their appeal had paid dividends. A clerk at the gas station reported that the robber was wearing a blue camouflage shirt with sunglasses and a Vans hat. After entering the store, he walked over to one of the fridges and got a soda. He then walked over to the counter, but instead of taking out his wallet, he reached into his pocket and produced a note that read, "Open the drawer, give me all your money or I'll shoot." The clerk had no choice but to hand over all the money in his register, and LeMedieu managed to flee with about $250. But before he did so, he told the teller to wait 5 minutes before contacting the police so that he could make a clean getaway. The clerk then watched as he got into a gold-colored car and drove away. He then phoned the police, who started the investigation. At this point, LeMedieu had not been identified, and he went on to commit another robbery the following day. At around 6:16 p.m., he walked into a Subway sandwich franchise and told one of the servers that he was looking for something for his girlfriend. But before the server could respond, he once again produced a note stating that he had a weapon and that he wanted the man to hand over all the large bills he had in his register. It isn't known how much cash he fled with, but investigators then looked at the store's CCTV security footage, and LeMedieu's photo was uploaded to Facebook, along with an appeal for any members of the public who recognized him to come forward. One of LeMedieu's former roommates, a man named Nick Hedges, immediately recognized him thanks to the hat and sunglasses that he was wearing, as well as his unique hairstyle, and he immediately contacted the police. He was able to provide them with LeMedieu's address, where he was staying at a halfway house, and they immediately traveled there to look for him. But the manager of the building told them that he'd not been back to the house in more than a week after leaving with his girlfriend. He was ultimately tracked down to a different halfway house, and upon their arrival, investigators spotted his car, which had his cap and blue shirt, sitting on one of the back seats. They also discovered that he was likely planning another robbery, since they found another threatening note in the car that hadn't been used. It stated that he had a firearm, he only wanted big bills, that he didn't want to hurt anyone, that the teller should wait 5 minutes before reporting the robbery, and that he would be watching the store after he left. Following his arrest, he explained that he'd fallen on hard times after recently relapsing, and that he stole money to buy food since he was always hungry. He was charged with 2 counts of robbery, though it isn't known what his sentence was. Hedges later told media outlets that when he and another roommate parted ways with LeMedieu, it wasn't on good terms, and hence he had no qualms about turning him in to the police. He added that he'd contacted the authorities on 3 other occasions after recognizing a criminal on Facebook, but as far as he knew, this was the first time that it led to an arrest. He also stated that he was glad that LeMedieu would now be receiving the help that he needed. When committing a robbery, one would think that a criminal would want to get it over with as soon as possible, since this gives them the best chance at a clean escape, and lingering on the scene would be much too risky. But it seems that not everyone shares this sense of urgency when committing a crime, as many criminals have been caught in the act after having more than enough time to leave. One such case played out in Washington in 2016. 27-year-old Michelle McGlynn Bell seemed to be in no hurry while she was in the process of burglarizing a house in the Perry district, since she stopped in the midst of the crime to enjoy some gelato. It isn't certain why she decided to check the house's freezer, since she was likely looking for valuable items to steal, but when she did, she spotted the gelato and decided to treat herself before completing her crime. The homeowner later found the empty container and spoon that she had used at the scene, but unbeknownst to Bell, A neighbor had grown suspicious of her presence at the house and had the forethought to take a photo of her, though it didn't show her face. But it did, however, show a part of her car. The neighbor then posted the photo to Facebook, and it was quickly discovered that she was not only responsible for this break-in, but a string of others that had taken place in the Perry district. Now that they'd connected her to these crimes, the only thing left to do was to track her down. But this proved a little more difficult, as Belle had clearly learned how to commit burglaries without being caught. Her luck wouldn't last forever though, and during one break-in, she was interrupted by the homeowner when they arrived home while the robbery was in progress. He discovered her in an apartment in his backyard, along with duffel bags and boxes of stolen items that she'd been hiding around the area following her robberies. When she realized that she'd been caught red-handed, she attempted to flee, but the homeowner managed to chase her down and he held her on the ground while contacting the police. This was no easy feat, as she started hitting and kicking him, and he later stated that she even bit him on his wrist, but he held her down until the police arrived and she was finally taken into custody after weeks of searching. Following this, residents in the neighborhood started scouring the area, and after a few hours they were able to retrieve some of their stolen belongings that had been scattered around the area for later retrieval. They described it as taking part in a scavenger hunt for their own belongings. Belle would immediately be charged with 9 counts, including assault, theft, and 5 burglaries that she had committed. She pleaded guilty to all of the charges, but since she's never been in trouble with the law before, she was given a light sentence of 0 to 90 days behind bars. She received credit for 63 days that she had already served, and went on to serve a year in community custody. This meant that she would be working for the community while being supervised by a probation officer or similar authority figure. It isn't often that a criminal is brought to justice after being positively identified by one of their own family members, but it does occasionally happen, especially when there's no doubt that they're the ones who carried out the crime. Unfortunately, for one robber who hailed from Milwaukee, this is exactly what happened, though it should be noted that this wasn't the only factor that led to his arrest, since he managed to leave a trail of evidence behind. In 2019, 18-year-old Malik Hartfield made the fateful decision to rob a bank, a TCF bank branch that was situated inside of a pick and save store. The store was located on North 35th Street on the 2300 block. On that morning, Hartfield traveled to the bank and walked inside pretending to be a customer. He then walked up to one of the bank tellers and handed them a note, instructing them to hand over any money they had. Bank tellers are trained to comply with these types of commands, since resistance would usually put customers and other employees' lives at risk, and so they handed over whatever cash they had, which totaled $1,300. Hartfield fled the scene. Once he was out of the building, the police were called and the note was handed over to them. Further investigation at the bank also revealed that he'd left a fingerprint behind on one of the outside doors, and another was found on the demand note. Furthermore, he was seen on security footage wearing an odd-looking sweatshirt that was quickly found to match one that he was wearing in a photo that he uploaded to his Facebook profile. The words TC Running Company were printed on the shirt, making it easy to identify. Investigators later learned that only 40 of those sweatshirts were ever produced. With all the evidence that was found, it was easy to obtain a search warrant for his house, where his mother was able to confirm his identity after she was shown the surveillance footage from the store and the photo that was uploaded to Facebook. Investigators also found 2 more notes demanding money, and they believe he was planning on at least 2 more robberies, but he never had the time to do so. Many people have commented on this case and expressed their disbelief at the fact that someone would rob a bank while wearing easily identifiable clothing that's known to belong to them. Usually, a robber, whether they're breaking into a bank or a house, won't wear their everyday clothes for this very reason, since they could easily be identified. But Hartfield seemingly didn't care to hide his identity, or hadn't thought that far ahead, and just a short while later, he was finally tracked down and arrested. He was charged with robbery of a financial institution, and if found guilty, faced up to 40 years in prison, though it isn't known what the outcome of his trial was. Vehicle theft is a crime that involves a lot of people, since a stolen car nowadays can usually be traced, thanks to software that's installed in the vehicle. Hence, when the car is stolen, it's usually either quickly dismantled at a chop shop or it has the tracker removed. But It often happens that when a criminal is tracked down, they're found to be driving a stolen car. This is usually because they were planning on dumping the car after committing a crime, or because they hadn't had the chance to get rid of it yet. Most people would consider it a big mistake to keep a car that had been stolen, but one man, 23-year-old Nicholas Coffey from Florida, seemingly had no such concerns after he stole a Mercedes-Benz during a crime spree. The Volusia County Sheriff's Office was informed that someone had been breaking into houses in the Deltona area. It was believed that the crimes were being committed by two men who were in the habit of wearing face masks and gloves to hide their identities. After the Mercedes-Benz was stolen in Ormond Beach, investigators found surveillance footage from a gas station in the area, which showed a man who could be seen arriving in the car before walking into the shop and purchasing some items. He was seen wearing a face mask and blue latex gloves. It then came to light that Coffey had been boasting on his social media that he'd somehow acquired a new Mercedes-Benz, and when investigators did further digging into his posts, they noticed that he could be seen wearing the same clothes as the man in their surveillance footage at the gas station. He was also easily identifiable thanks to what one officer described as his distinctive face and neck tattoos. The case was made even easier by the fact that the same officer was already investigating a case in which Coffey was a suspect, and so he was aware of his appearance. It soon also came to light that Coffey and his accomplice had been captured during their crime spree by security cameras in the area, and this footage was then made available to investigators who started searching for them. The Mercedes' movements were then tracked with the use of license plate readers, and it was found to have been driven on 5 of the streets where break-ins occurred. All of these thefts involved cars that were broken into between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. on one Saturday morning. Since so much evidence has been found to implicate him, Coffey was quickly tracked down in Daytona Beach where he was arrested. During an interview in Deltona, he neither admitted nor denied to being involved in the crimes, but he was charged with 11 counts of conspiracy to commit burglary of conveyance. He was also charged with conspiracy to commit attempted burglary of a conveyance, fraudulently using someone else's credit card, and violating his probation since he was found to be in possession of a firearm while being a felon. His bond for the charge was set at $57,500 for the charge of using someone's credit card. His bond was set at $15,000, though a second bond wasn't added for the felony charge. While Coffey was quickly identified, his accomplice remains unknown, and investigators continue to investigate the case in hopes that he will be apprehended. They've urged anyone with information on this case to come forward. 17-year-old Haley Faith Wilson had disappeared from her Amarillo home in Texas on the 26th of December 2011. Her father, Ray, woke the next morning only to find his daughter missing, and so he created a video in which he appealed to the public for assistance in finding the missing teen. Ray had told a local TV station that Haley left through a bedroom window along with her bedding and her guitar. She also left a note stating she felt as though she had nothing going for her, and he shouldn't look for her. But Ray immediately reported his daughter as a runaway to local authorities. Her father additionally made a video which he posted on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, appealing to the public to help find his missing daughter. The video went viral. It was not long before he built up a network of followers who were assisting in the search. Some of the viewers who saw the video believed it was just a stunt to draw attention to Ray's music. But his effort in releasing the videos actually paid off. It was on a Tuesday, not long after Haley went missing, on the 3rd of January in 2012 that she was found. Police officers located in Carlsbad, California, managed to find the missing teen. One of the police officers had pulled over the 17-year-old and would detain her when he learned she was missing. Jody Sassaway, a Carlsbad police spokesperson, stated that Haley had been detained at 4:42 that morning at Caribou Court and Whiptail Loop after an officer was making a safety check. Ray Wilson is said to be the owner and the president of a computer business for Amarillo and other towns nearby. Ray is also the bass guitarist for a band called Texas Heat. Ray and his wife have 3 daughters and 1 son. In Ray's video that he posted to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, He holds up an introduction note that reads, quote, "This is my 17-year-old daughter, Haley Faith Wilson." In a poster, a picture of the missing girl was shown and detailed that she left with her 2003 silver Ford Focus ZTW station wagon with the number plate CZ4P044. It listed the Amarillo Police Department number as 806-378-3038. She was detailed as being a height of 5 feet and 6 inches and weighing 120 pounds. At the time, she was believed to be wearing tie-dye and various bracelets. They further believed that Haley was on her way to Los Angeles. In the video, Ray held up the notes that his daughter had left behind. One read, "It's because you care. There's nothing going for me. I love you more than you know. You'll get my goodbye, all my loving. I will send it to you." Another note read, "Don't look for me, Dad. I know you'll go to the end of the earth for me, but you won't find me." Additionally, Haley had left behind a map that highlighted Humboldt, Arcata, and Bisbee. Ray showed another flashcard that read, quote, "I just want her to be found safe," and luckily she was. Ray believed that taking to social media to find his missing teen was the best way to handle it and hoped for a miracle. Within a few hours, the video had more than 167,000 hits and gained a large following. The video showed the worried father holding up flashcards with the written story. One tip had come in where someone sent Ray a link to 3 locations listed as hippie havens that are found in the areas that Haley had highlighted on her map. At first, Ray didn't understand the relationship between them. He believed his daughter was alone and that none of her friends or family had heard from his missing daughter. In the video, the worried father pleads for any information and tells his viewers to pass on the message, which would lead to widespread coverage of the missing teen's disappearance. Haley was considered a legal adult in Texas, given her age, and her name has since been entered into the national database of runaways. Ray explained that once he discovered that his daughter was missing, he went out to start the car, but it wasn't there. Ray came to the decision to make and share this video after he received many questions regarding his daughter's disappearance. He thought that the best way was to collectively explain the situation and share it on as many platforms as possible. It was explained that the family just had an amazing Christmas. There was snow, friends, and the family appeared happy. It had also been Haley's first Christmas where she was able to buy everyone in the family a gift, after having gotten a job and saving money. Haley had been proud of this accomplishment, and it's why it came as such a shock to the family when they found that Haley had run away the following day. Social media had been the biggest hope in finding her. While the officer who stopped the teen may have been notified of her disappearance on a database, it's likely that he had seen the video in question as it was shared and viewed so many times. Tips, such as the Hippie Havens one, had come from the release of this video as well. One college student explained that she knew a lot of people in the area and that they would be keeping their eyes open. This event would also be shared on Reddit under the subreddit r/Texas. One commenter stated that they'd seen this shared all over Facebook since he had a lot of friends who were friends with Ray. It was coverage like this that led to most of the Texas area knowing about Haley's disappearance. It's uncertain what happened thereafter. It's known that she was found in California and detained, but was also considered a legal adult, so it's uncertain if she was taken back to her parents' house or not. It was during the Second World War when Paul Ulam, an American mathematician, had created 2 ciphers. The ciphers were named Ulam 1 and Ulam 2. They'd been challenged by the atomic physicist Richard Feynman, which is why they were known more by the name of the Feynman ciphers. Unfortunately, Richard Feynman was unable to find a solution to both of these puzzles, and they remained unsolved for about 75 years. It's said that another 3 coded messages were given to Feynman, and are known as the Feynman ciphers, or the Feynman challenge ciphers, but their authors are unknown. By the late 1970s, the codes were still undeciphered, and so Feynman passed them off to Chris Cole. He was a graduate student from Caltech. It was on the 20th of December in 1987 when Chris had posted a Usenet message which contained the transcriptions for the ciphers. In the message, he detailed that when he was a Caltech graduate, Feynman had shown him 3 code samples, which he was challenged with at Los Alamos. Chris detailed that Feynman was unable to crack the codes and that he too struggled to do so. And so he was posting them for the public to give others a try at solving the puzzles. Feynman had labeled all 3 of these as ciphers. The first was called Easier, which was solved the very next day by Jack Morrison. The cipher was the first 12 lines of the general prologue of the Canterbury Tales written by Geoffrey Chaucer in Middle English. The second code was labeled as Harder, and the third as New Message. These two ciphers remained unsolved for decades. An individual from Roanoke College, Paul Relkin, authored an article from the solution of Olam 1. An image of this cipher is shown in the article. It appears as random letters, all written without spacing, and seems to be nonsensical. Another image in this article revealed Feynman's annotations on the Olam 1 cipher. The notes seem to detail that Feynman believed that it had been a simple substitution method, including rearrangements that were incomplete. This was solved by using a program for monoalphabetic substitution solving, and the use of a hill-climbing version of the Jacobson algorithm. The text then appeared as random letters, but was found that when reversing it, it all seemed to make sense. The cipher also included null letters. The solver, though, could count the number of spaces between these letters and establish a pattern. Olam 1 found its solution by taking out characters at an interval that was found to be the first 11 digits of the square root of the number 2. Reversing the text and applying alphanumeric substitution, the code was solved. After some punctuation was added, the solver found that the cipher detailed a process of items shipped and delivered to a secret Los Alamos facility. The person who solved this cipher was the author of the article. He's said to be a software developer and the engineer of the Worldview search engine. Olam 2 was later solved in 2019, which Paul Relkin also solved. However, two of the other three ciphers given to Professor Feynman, Feynman 1 and 2, still had not been solved. That was until a Redditor who called themselves Code Warrior 0 posted on a subreddit r/codes that they finally solved these two ciphers. Feynman number 2 in ciphertext reads as a collection of randomized letters of 261 characters in total. Code Warrior managed to crack this code and found that the cipher was from Terence. This is stupid stuff written by A.E. Hausman in 1896. It read the following, quote, "Why, if 'tis dancing you will be, there is brisker pipes than poetry. Say, for what were hop yards meant, or why was Burton built on Trent? Oh, many a peer of England brews livelier liquor than the Muse, and malt does more than Milton can to justify God's ways to man. Ale, man, ale's the stuff to drink for fellows whom it hurts to think." Feynman number 3 had a ciphertext of 231 characters. Code Warrior found that this was actually the atomic theory of the lambda transition in helium that had been written by Professor Richard Feynman himself. It read, quote, "The behavior of liquid helium, especially below the lambda transition, is very curious. The most successful theoretical interpretations so far have been largely phenomenological. In this paper, and one or two to follow, the problem will be studied entirely from first principles." The two codes make use of the same method, two monoalphabetic substitutions, which couldn't be recovered completely. In the method, each of the words in the ciphertext is enciphered by one of the substitutions. The substitutions alternate between both after every word. The first word of each sentence or line of poetry uses alphabet 1, which can sometimes lead to alphabet 1 being used for the first two words. Words that have an even amount of letters are found to be written in reverse. On his Reddit post, Code Warrior listed a link to how he had solved the cipher so that the other Redditors may look it over and review his work. Commenters congratulated him and uplifted his accomplishment. Many individuals have tried tirelessly for decades to solve both of the Feynman ciphers, but it was a Redditor who managed to do it. The solve path that the Redditor used had a letter frequency of neither polyalphabetic nor monoalphabetic for the two ciphers. The overall index of coincidence, according to Code Warrior 0, was 0.045 for Feynman number 2, and 0.042 for Feynman number 3. According to his findings, there had been no telltale spikes in the plot of the periodic index of coincidence. Repetitions in the ciphers had been more than expected. SQXO, a 4-letter repetition, had been found in both the ciphers, along with various 3-lettered words. Code Warrior 0 noted that the letter frequency of both ciphers had been so similar that he believed or suspected that they had shared a method. For ages, these two ciphers were left in the unsolved file. The individual would frequently return to the visionary encipherment and check the Kappa IOC between both of the ciphers. He stated that the breakthrough would come when he had concatenated the two ciphers, reversed text, and used AZ decrypt, which would produce some sort of decipherment that would require some more figuring out. The Redditor would then go on to use simple substitution along with other methods of solving and managed to crack both of the enciphered codes. In a response to one of the Redditors, Code Warrior Zero stated that he believed Feynman would have been able to solve them if he'd had more cryptologic training. On the 15th of June 2011, the Vancouver Stanley Cup riot took place and has been called the most documented riot in history. It was on this day when the Vancouver Canucks had gone against the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals. This would go on to be an emotionally charged event. After the game had taken place, things took a turn. Soon, there was widespread disorder and property damage, which would all go on to have a severe impact on the city's reputation. The cause of such an extensive riot was due to the intense emotion and expectations among the fans of the Canucks. This only bred an atmosphere of frustration. The Canucks lost the game 4-0 in game number 7. Frustrations by now had reached their peak. Along with this loss and the addition of emotions and the buildup of frustration resulted in an outburst of chaos on the Vancouver streets. What incited the violence or worsened it was that of a small group of instigators. This group initially began to vandalize property and incite others to do the same. It was not long before mob mentality had grabbed a hold of the community. Violence spread like wildfire through the streets. Cars would be overturned and local businesses were looted. By the end of it, there were millions of dollars worth of damages inflicted on the city streets. Authorities struggled to maintain the forces, and it would take hours before they could restore order. After the riot had come to an end, the level of destruction was clear. Iconic landmarks had been marred and the streets were in ruin. The public expressed embarrassment and shock at the events that had just occurred before them. This incident would spark a broader societal conversation that spoke of the influence of sports on the behavior of the public, and how the fans have a responsibility to showcase a positive image for their team and their city. There would also be an increase in scrutiny of safety measures during such large-scale events. This would focus on preventing any further violent outbursts. As for the culprits involved in the mass level of destruction, they not only felt the wrath of the authorities, but also of Facebook vigilantes. These vigilantes had tracked down various participants, along with their names and even their addresses. Various images of the riot had shown the power of social media, both in good and bad ways, in finding these individuals. One caller to a local Vancouver radio talk station noted that the internet is forever. If one person has been rightfully or wrongfully identified as one of the participants in the Vancouver riot, their picture will ultimately make it online, since these riots have been posted ever since that fateful day. The caller stated, quote, "You could apply for a job in 20 years, and all the employer has to do is Google your name. If you're the one in one of these photos, you're out of luck." Some of the rioters confessed and were apprehended for the damage they had caused. Additionally, as reported in MarketWatch.com, some of the employers of these individuals are also facing the wrath of the public. Christy Clark, British Columbia's premier, had echoed the thoughts that the residents of Vancouver had when she promised jail in terms of these convicted participants. The day after the riot had taken place, various websites went up, which were used to identify them, as well as to gain the help of the public to assist in identifying the rioters shown on the mobile phone images. The Insurance Corporation of British Columbia even offered to take images to the Vancouver authorities after the public made use of facial recognition software to identify some of these individuals who had caused over $2 million worth of damage to the streets, downtown stores, and local businesses during their 4-hour rampage. Another useful tool in identifying the rioters was the creation of a Facebook group that was called Vancouver Riot Pics, Post Your Photos. The group has received over 100,000 likes and has uploaded hundreds of images of suspected participants. One image that appeared was that of a man who was smashing a car window. The caption read, quote, "If anyone knows who this is, can you please send me his name and address? A $200 reward will be given. Please help, he did this to my mother's car." One individual who was part of the rioting was a member of the Olympics water polo team. This individual was pictured attacking a police car. He quickly apologized for his behavior, but was subsequently met with being suspended from the team. The parents of this individual had also been threatened, and their address was released online, which ultimately caused them to flee. Other legal ramifications in the online backlash presented themselves. The owner of a local coffee shop chain, Blends, filed a lawsuit against 150 of the unnamed rioters who had destroyed 3 of his locations. In the lawsuit, the defendants are named as John Doe 1 through 75 and Jane Doe 1 through 75. George Moen, Blend's owner, stated that there should be more than enough evidence in the photos and videos that were captured as the riot was taking place. This would make the John and Jane Does easily identifiable. More than 200 arrests had been made thereafter. Rioters, who were mostly identified by the online community, had turned themselves in. Some of the rioters also made the mistake of boasting about their exploitive destruction on Facebook, which only led them to be met with anger from Facebook users. Both employers as well as rioters have faced backlash online. One example of this was an employer from a local car dealership who employed one of the rioters who would go on to face the angered online vigilantes who stated that they would not purchase a car from this dealership. Other local companies have similar backlash. Some have been left trying to contain the damage that their reputations have sustained due to their association with the rioters. A manager of one recruitment firm explained that he'd been receiving worried messages from clients due to employees involved with the firm popping up on social media and being identified as one of the participants. A proliferation of websites were dedicated to naming and shaming the rioters, which they had done. The actions of the social media users were described as vigilantism. Images, names, and addresses were all posted online for the public to see. Some rioters have complained about receiving hate calls as well as threats. Some have been fired from their local jobs. One participant was allegedly called a thief and a loser. He was threatened by the vigilantes that were going to turn him into the police. He would then receive messages of hateful content as his identity became known and publicized. A carpenter was also let go from his job after he applauded rioters on his Facebook account and posted a message stating that Vancouver needed remodeling. This has not only affected the businesses and the rioters, but innocent people as well. Photoshopping allows for innocent residents to look as though they had participated in this event when they had not. Some have even asked the question if it's right to have publicly shamed these rioters on social media platforms. This may be up for debate, but one thing is certain. Many of the people who took part in the Vancouver Stanley Cup riot were identified and faced repercussions for their actions. It was not long before rioters would have to brace themselves for a visit from authorities. It took 2 weeks for those responsible for the riots to begin suffering the consequences. On the 31st of July in 2006, Perplex City, an alternate reality game, released packs of puzzles that would range in difficulty. It would range from easy, differentiated with the color red, to impossible with silver. Those who played the game were to solve these puzzles and enter the solutions onto the website, which would then add them to the leaderboard. The game came to an end 2 years later in 2008. Silver card puzzle number 256 was called Billion to One. This card would feature a man and Japanese characters that read Watashi o mitsuke nasai, translating to "Find Me." The game gave a one-line hint to the puzzle. It was, "My name is Satoshi." It was in the same year as its creation that one of the players, Lara E. Hall, would create the Find Satoshi website for the quick sharing of information that anyone came across while trying to solve the puzzle. One of the gamers managed to identify the background of these cars as being located in France. In December of 2007, Laura had, by coincidence, been to this area for a work trip and visited the town where she would be able to find the exact same spot that Satoshi had posed for the image. A co-founder named Mind Candy was able to confirm some more information. Satoshi had been a willing participant in the game and had to be contacted directly. It would also be discovered that he'd been given a password, which he was to tell anyone who had contacted him regarding the game and the puzzle. From the start, there had been some news coverage on the puzzle, which included an interview on ABC and an article featured on The Guardian, as well as the New York Times. But the spreading of information was relied upon by word of mouth and link sharing. Over the years, Laura would receive some emails regarding tips on the Satoshi mystery, but they would never result in a real connection. One of these emails had pointed to Los Angeles, but the tipster had not replied to any follow-up questions. A few years later, Laura contacted them again, but they said there was no way they would be able to contact the person. That they knew who allegedly knew Satoshi. The trail would go cold with some random surges after some internet users would come across the site. This strange internet mystery would rise again in 2018 when Asher Isbrucker interviewed Mind Candy as well as Lauren on a podcast regarding the project. In February of 2020, Inside a Mind made a YouTube video regarding the mystery as well, which would spark community interest. The interest would include the rival of both Reddit as well as Discord. In December of 2020, Thome, a Redditor whose name is Thomas Lucas Sager from Germany, made use of AI facial recognition. Through this, he would come to find a picture of a man holding a beverage in his hand with other individuals. This image was posted in 2018 to social media. After some further digging, more images of this individual began to pop up. It was of a man living in Nagano, Japan. It was found that the man's facial features, including his freckles, matched up exactly with Satoshi. But direct contact would still have to be made with him in order to confirm the suspicion. His company website was soon discovered, and so was his email address. Laura had been helped by some of her friends in Japan to compose an email in English and Japanese to send to who they believed to be Satoshi. It was only one day later that she would receive a reply. The response was rewarding. The man was in fact the Satoshi that they'd been looking for. His email response exclaimed that he was Satoshi. He detailed that he'd forgotten all about the card game and didn't even think that anyone was still looking for him. He recalled that he was supposed to give whoever found him a secret message, but he'd forgotten what it was since it had been over 10 years since the puzzle was posted. Satoshi would go on to explain that he didn't know much about the alternate reality game in question, but between 14 and 15 years ago, one of his American friends had requested to use his photograph in the game. He immediately agreed. After this, Satoshi didn't hear much about the game, nor did he know exactly what it was. Satoshi explained that his name is extremely common in Japan, and expressed amazement that anyone was able to find him based off of one image and one clue. Before the mystery had finally been solved, there had been various theories. The same Redditor who was able to figure out who Satoshi was theorized that the person on the card was Satoshi Shimojima, who was one of the executives. As soon as Thome had solved the case, he updated his comments and posts. It was who he initially thought of, Satoshi Shimojima. He was congratulated by fellow Redditors who were also investigating this curious mystery. Another Redditor expressed that the freckles and moles on Satoshi's face had matched up perfectly. Another stated that they were trying to dig up more information. This comment read that Satoshi had no known connection to France, but could have run a marathon there. They then posted a link to the marathon's 2008 results, which included Satoshi Shimojima, who had completed the marathon in 2 hours and 16 minutes. Thome explained that he was in contact with Laura, and that she would be asking her friends in Japan if they could make contact with Satoshi. Thome had not yet received a response to his own email, and finally, the lengthy puzzle that was forgotten about by most had finally been solved. The picture of the man on the card was Satoshi Shimojima. This puzzle was among one of the more difficult ones. The levels ranged from easiest to hardest in the following colors, being red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, and then silver. The Find Satoshi puzzle was a silver card. Miraculously, after many years, an internet sleuth was finally able to bring the case to a close. Other cards included number 238, Ryman, which had challenged users to provide the Ryman hypothesis. Card 251, the 13th Labor, confronted the user with a cipher of 352 characters. At the time, it was expected that it would take 30,000 computers running at the same time to solve it. And the next difficult card was Billion to One, number 256, Find Satoshi. Sean Hornbeck was born in April of 1991, and Ben Ownby in 1995 in Richwood, Missouri. The reason that their names are often linked together is that in the year 2002, their lives would become unexpectedly intertwined. Sean was 11 years old and living in rural Missouri. His mother, Pam Akers, watched as her son left the house in the afternoon of the 6th of October in 2002 to go for a bicycle ride. What she didn't expect was that she would never see him again until a few years later. It's alleged that a man who was driving a white pickup truck had knocked Sean from his bicycle and proceeded to put him in the truck and leave. Craig and Pam, Sean's parents, reacted to this tragedy by founding the Sean Hornbeck Foundation, as well as the Hornbeck Search and Rescue Team, which assists in child abductions. The two had appeared on the Montel Williams show after Sean had vanished. During this show, a self-proclaimed scientist would claim that Sean was deceased, but this was later proven to be untrue. At the time, no one had known that the boy was actually still alive and was taken to a Kirkwood apartment where he would live with his kidnapper. 5 years after Sean was initially abducted, another boy was taken. This time, it was 13-year-old Ben Oni. On the 8th of January in 2007, Ben was waiting at a Beaufort bus stop in Franklin County. The kidnapper had taken him and placed him in a Nissan pickup truck and sped off. Mitchell Holtz, a friend of Ben's, managed to get a good look at the truck and detailed it to authorities. After Ben's abduction, an internet sleuth and true crime writer, Michelle McNamara, noticed that there was a connection between Ben and Sean's abductions. In 2007, McNamara, who was also a blogger at the time, had made a correct connection between the two cases, just a day before the two kidnapped boys were found and the perpetrator was arrested. The blogger had found a major tip that was suggestive of Ben and Sean's disappearances being connected. She posted on her blog that the two cases were similar, and both had occurred 38 miles from Beaufort. She detailed that even though at the time of Ben's abduction he was 2 years older than Sean, he did look young for his age. The two boys were also rather similar. Sean was 4 feet and 8 inches tall and weighed around 90 pounds. He was 2 inches shorter than Ben and 10 pounds lighter. McNamara believed that Ben was abducted due to his youthful appearance. Ben's case now dominated the news, while Sean's seemingly fell off the radar. During her sleuthing, she added a map of the area detailing where the boys had been taken from. The blogger's observations were notable due to her close attention to detail. McNamara's post had gone on to True Crime Daily just 1 day prior to the arrest of Michael Delvin and the discovery of both Ben and Sean. Unfortunately, authorities and the media did not seem to recognize the woman's accomplishment, but her fans and true crime specialists did. After the arrest of Delvin, McNamara continued to note the details but showed some additional layers to the abductions. Jamie Reedy outlined some of these details in the Notre Dame magazine. In an interview, one of the victim's brothers spoke of family vacations that they would take on Lake Michigan. McNamara had done some online property searches and found that a man who had the same name as the kidnapper's father owned a house in western Michigan, close to the lake. Reedy explained that McNamara had then searched missing boys southwest Michigan and found an additional missing person case in Benton Harbor. The boy looked very similar to both Sean as well as Ben. Delvin is said to be a suspect in 5 missing boy cases. The day after McNamara had found her connection between the two cases, the FBI would then follow up on a tip about a white truck. The tip led them to a Kirkwood pizzeria. The store manager had been Michael Delvin, who owned the truck. Delvin allowed Lynn Willett and Tina Richter, 2 federal agents, to search the truck. During the search, the kidnapper sat in the back of the FBI vehicle while he and Willett had a lengthy conversation. It was then that Delvin would confess. He told her that he was a bad person before admitting that he did have the 2 missing boys. The agents would later join with others as well as local police who were on their way to the 400 block of S. Holmes Avenue, Delvin's apartment. He opened the front door for the authorities and followed them inside. The investigators came to find the 2 boys playing video games. Ben Ownby was recognized immediately as his case was still fresh. Sean, though, had aged 4 years. That night, the Franklin County Sheriff, Glenn Tolk, made the announcement stating that the 2 boys were found safe and sound. Delvin would later admit that the reason he abducted Ben was because Sean was getting older, thus confirming McNamara's theory. Delvin would later be charged with a variety of crimes. Mitchell Holtz, Ben's friend, additionally received an award for his tip on the pickup truck. In an interview, it was discovered that Sean had slept and played video games throughout his captivity, and had been instructed to tell anyone that he was homeschooled. Sean did not try to escape, as he believed that Delvin might harm his family if he tried to do so. Additionally, he was also made to act as though he was the kidnapper's son. In the years prior to Delvin's arrest, Sean had spoken with police officers on more than one occasion, but they hadn't recognized him. Delvin would then go on to plead guilty to all the charges against him and get 74 life sentences. He was given an additional sentencing of 2,020 years. The kidnapper was taken to the Western Missouri Correctional Center in Cameron. He would not be eligible for parole until he reaches the age of 100 years old. After an incident occurred at the prison, Delvin was placed under protective custody at the state prison. As for the Sean Hornbeck Foundation, that ceased in 2013, as the Akers family found that they could no longer maintain it, but the community committed to founding another search and rescue that would become known as the Missouri Valley Search and Rescue Team, and they're dedicated to assisting the families of both missing children as well as missing adults. The Anson light is a ghostly phenomenon that appears on a certain road in Anson, Texas, and over the years, people have flocked to that specific spot in hopes that they might catch a glimpse of the light that's said to accompany the spirit of a woman. The legend of the Anson light revolves around a woman and her son, though some sources state that she had 3 sons who lived near Anson in the 1800s. On one particularly cold and snowy night, she asked her sons to head out to chop some firewood for the house, since it was only getting colder and they were in for a long night. The boys agreed and started to head out, grabbing a lantern to light their way. But before they walked out into the snow, she told them that if they ran into trouble of any kind, they were to flash the lantern 3 times and she would come to their aid. And so the boys braved the elements in search of dry wood, with their mother keeping an eye on the lantern light from the safety of their house. She didn't expect them to be too long, but to her dismay, she saw the lantern's light flash 3 times, and she immediately grabbed her own lantern, running out into the snow to where the lantern was. But when she arrived, she couldn't locate any of her sons, and search as she may, they remained missing until she passed away sometime later. It's said that the light that appears on that road is the lantern that she held while looking for her sons, and that she's still doing so to this day. But the spirit doesn't appear at random, as there are a set of instructions to make her appear. First, you need to drive out of town towards Alsop's Road, where you make a right turn towards the town cemetery. There, you'll find a dirt road that runs parallel to the cemetery, and along the way, you'll come across a crossroads where you're meant to turn the car around and turn off the engine. Lastly, you're supposed to flash the car's lights 3 times, as was done with the boy's lantern. This is said to prompt the woman's spirit to appear as she sets out once more to look for her lost sons. The light from her lantern will then approach any vehicle that has followed these instructions, but before it reaches the car, it'll fade away until it completely disappears. Some people who have seen the Anson light say that it changed color from a normal white color to orange or red, and in some cases it would change size and shape. Some witnesses say that the light dances from side to side as it approaches, while others claim that it stayed static the entire time that they saw it. One man decided to drive directly toward the light on one occasion, and as he reached it, he says it shot up into the air at great speed before disappearing. But not everyone is convinced by this tale. In 2001, Professor Richard Beck and a few of his students from Abilene Christian University decided to do an investigation into the light with the use of their iPhones. They used the phone's GPS and Google Maps to track the light that they saw, and found that it originated on US Route 277, a short section of which lines up perfectly with the road that they were watching from. They continued to track the light, and soon it became clear that they had debunked the mystery of the Anson light. It would turn out that the ghostly light was actually nothing more than headlights belonging to cars driving on Route 277. This isn't the first time that Professor Beck has attempted to find the source of the light. He had taken a group of students out to the same spot a few years earlier, but they were unable to make a definitive judgment on whether the lights belonged to a ghost or not. He credits the success of their second investigation to the online apps on their iPhones, and states that if they didn't have that technology available to them, they would have never been able to solve this eerie mystery. Good Life is a popular festival that's held in Australia every year, and with every iteration it sees more visitors flock to the venue that's aimed primarily at fans between 13 and 17 years old. Here, they can see famous live bands from all over the world in a safe environment that includes food stalls, carnival rides, movie screenings, market stalls, areas where you can play video games, and a chill-out zone where they can take a breather if necessary. The first of these festivals was held in March of 2010, and it's grown in popularity as it now sees as many as 78,000 people in attendance every year in Brisbane, Perth, Sydney, and Melbourne. Usually, the festival goes off without a hitch, but in 2016, a photographer at the Brisbane event noticed something strange in one of his pictures when he reviewed them after the fact, and in the days that followed, internet users were abuzz with the news that the grounds may be haunted. In the photo, which was taken from the back of the crowd, people can be seen dancing to the music with their arms in the air, but it's what can be seen off to the side that has caused all the fuss. In the distance, on one side of the field, the translucent figure of a young girl can be seen standing somberly atop a roof, as if she's jealous of all the fun that's going on without her. She's wearing a long white dress and has long dark hair draped over her shoulders. As soon as the image was made public, people began to speculate about the supposed spirit and who she could be. When the photo was uploaded to Facebook, one commenter attempted to shed light on the mystery by recounting a local urban legend. According to Facebook user James Michael, the spirit is that of a young girl by the name of Lucy Jane McConnell, who was the daughter of James McConnell, the president of the RNA. The story goes that in 1908, Lucy was attending the Royal Exhibition, and after the event had concluded, she decided to watch the fireworks show that always follows. The legend holds that she was watching the show from the roof of a nearby building while holding her beloved teddy bear, and at one point she decided to stand up to get a better view of the proceedings. But just at that moment, she was pushed by a gust of wind that caused her to lose her balance and fall from the roof, causing her to lose her life. It's said that she still wanders around the buildings at night with her teddy bear in hand, sometimes playing tricks on people who have reported hearing the voice of a small child. Some people have also heard the sound of someone climbing that same roof as if she was reliving her final moments before the tragic fall. Festival organizers soon got wind of the creepy photo and created a post on Facebook in which they stated that they inspected the original image that was taken and found that it too contained the image of Lucy. They added that they'd interviewed some of the staff members that work for the Brisbane showgrounds, and that they were told that many of the employees simply refused to work around some of the sheds on the grounds, since the spirit of a young girl had been seen there on multiple occasions. But as is usually the case with pictures of supposed spirits, not everyone was convinced, and a website called themusic.com.au decided that a proper investigation was needed. They found that James McConnell was in fact a real man who lived in 1908, and he did indeed serve as the president of the RNA. McConnell and his wife would eventually have 10 children, but a little further digging revealed that none of them were named Lucy. They even went as far as checking the Queensland Government Registry of Births, Deaths, and Marriages for that period, and found that no girl by that name was ever registered. Shortly afterward, an employee of the Brisbane Showgrounds came forward to say that he wasn't aware of any hauntings in the area, and that claims of staff being too afraid to work in certain areas of the grounds were completely false. Whether it was all a marketing stunt to drum up more festival goers for the following year is uncertain, but the legend of Lucy Jane's spirit has been debunked for good. It isn't uncommon for a sighting of a UFO or a UAP to be caught on camera, as videos of this phenomenon can be found all over the internet in the blink of an eye. It is far more unusual for this type of footage to be captured on a police officer's body cam, which was the case in 2023 in Las Vegas, Nevada. In the footage from the 30th of April, the officer is standing by the side of the road next to his patrol vehicle at around 11:50 p.m. when a strange blue-green light can be seen streaking across the night sky. He can be heard discussing the sighting with bystanders, all of whom are baffled by what they saw. The sighting was reported by people living in Utah and California, as people called in to report what they had seen. This is already pretty strange, but the event would take an even stranger twist just 40 minutes later when a 911 call center received a call from someone living in the area. The man told the dispatcher that a strange object had crashed into his backyard, and when he and his family went out to investigate, they became terrified by what happened next. He stated that he saw the light out the corner of his eye, and following the crash, they felt a strange energy. A few moments later, they became aware of heavy footsteps in their backyard, and when they investigated, they saw what he described as a big piece of equipment that had seemingly crashed into their garden. He also told the dispatcher that two alien creatures, one being around 8 feet and the other being around 10 feet tall, were also present, the first standing next to the machine while the other was still inside. The man added that the creatures had large eyes and were looking directly at them. They said they immediately knew that the creatures were not human, and noted that their ship had left a perfect circle on the ground after the crash. Following the 911 call, 2 officers responded to the scene, but after conducting a thorough investigation, they could neither confirm nor debunk the family's claims, though a few of the officers said they were quite nervous while at the site. Internet users immediately latched onto the story, with speculation about whether the incident should be taken seriously. Soon after, a video emerged claiming to show the alien creatures as they stood in the family's yard. In the footage, a tall, humanoid creature can be seen sitting on its haunches in a patch of tall grass. It has impossibly long arms and fingers, a thick neck, and it moves strangely as it inspects the grass beneath it. At one point in the video, the creature suddenly swings around and looks back over its shoulders, revealing 2 eerily glowing eyes. This footage was quickly debunked when it was found that it was recorded weeks after the supposed crash had taken place. The video further lost all credibility when it was discovered that it was created by a TikTok account that's known to create AI-generated footage of well-known cryptids like Bigfoot and skinwalkers. But this wasn't enough to dismiss or confirm the family's claim, and some internet users decided to do a little further digging into the matter, focusing on the landing site rather than the alien creatures. And this is where the story unraveled completely. Since the family claimed that the alien's ship had left a perfect circle imprinted into their backyard, internet sleuths took to Google Earth for confirmation. But they found that the circle, which was indeed found during the police investigation, had been present in the yard for at least a year when the last Google Earth satellite image of the area was taken. And so the mystery and the family's claims of alien creatures in their garden was solved, to the disappointment of many ufologists. The story had gained a lot of followers at a time when discussion around UFOs and alien life forms reached a fever pitch, with several government employees coming forward, claiming to have knowledge of extraterrestrial craft that had been recovered by the US government. As for the green light that flashed across the Las Vegas sky, it was likely a meteor that burned up in the Earth's atmosphere. NASA's Planetary Defense Officer, Lindley Johnson, stated that the meteor was likely just over 3 feet wide, and that it certainly was not an alien spacecraft. The case has since been closed by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and all thoughts of alien creatures roaming around Las Vegas have been laid to rest. In 2017, a video was uploaded to YouTube that many people cited as some of the best poltergeist footage that had ever been captured on camera, and it quickly went viral, amassing over 20 million views to date. The footage, which was reportedly captured by a security camera in the Deer Park CBS school in Cork, Ireland, shows one of the school's hallways after hours at around 3 a.m. At first, everything seems normal, as the school is completely empty, and all we can see is a wet floor sign that's been placed in the middle of the hallway. But it doesn't take long before things get seriously creepy. First, a door that's located at the end of the hall swings open by itself. Next, a set of lockers on the far side of the hall start to rock back and forth without explanation, as if they're being pushed and pulled by some unseen force. The sound of the lockers hitting the floor can be heard reverberating through the building, but just a few seconds later they fall back into place and the school becomes quiet once more. But the activity only intensified from here. A few seconds later, a door in another set of lockers next to the first flies open, spilling books and papers onto the ground. This is followed by strange ticking noises, but it isn't clear where they're coming from. Lastly, the wet floor sign suddenly spins around and falls to the floor with a crash out of the camera's view. The footage ends there, but just a few weeks later, the school uploaded another video entitled "New Ghost Caught on Camera," and again it quickly went viral. In the second video, which is recorded from a different angle, a massive crash can be heard and the camera shakes from the impact, but again it isn't known what caused it. This is followed by a chair being dragged down the hall, despite there being no one near it, after which it's violently thrown onto the floor. Next, a backpack that's been placed on top of a set of lockers goes flying to the ground along with the poster that was hanging on the hallway's far wall. A few seconds later, another chair is pushed across the hall, and it comes to rest next to a classroom door. The footage seems pretty convincing, and many people believed that the school really was being haunted by a poltergeist. But not everyone was convinced, and some people speculated that it had all been created using special effects. And that's when one man who works for BuzzFeed decided to conduct an investigation of his own. In a video that was posted to YouTube, he states that he can prove the first video was a hoax and that there's no spirit present at the school. He starts by saying that he doubts the claims that the haunting was created by special effects, but that there are some other telltale signs that the video was faked. He refers to a previous video in which students at the school participated in the mannequin challenge, staying as still as possible while the camera passes through the school. Thanks to this footage, he was able to get a good view of the school's layout, and he found that the first set of lockers in the poltergeist video was not present in the mannequin video. Instead, the lockers had been moved to the hallway, where they were placed in front of a window. He believes that the lockers were not being rocked back and forth by an evil spirit, but rather by someone outside who had easy access to the window. Next, he took a closer look at the locker door that swung open, spilling books onto the floor. He adds that if the door had swung open without the books falling out, it wouldn't have had the same impact, and so he believes that a piece of string was attached to one of the books in the locker, and when it was pulled, the book forced the door open before falling to the ground. Added to this, he points out that there's no reason for a wet floor sign to be displayed at 3 a.m., and he finds it suspicious that it's facing the camera perfectly. As the sign flips over, he points out that a thin string attached to the back of the sign can be seen. As soon as this is pulled, the sign flips up into the air and crashes to the ground, making it appear as if it did so without any assistance. Lastly, he adds that a second CCTV camera can be seen in the same hallway, pointing at the same direction as the camera filming the footage. This would be completely unnecessary since there's no need for two cameras to record the same spot, and so he thinks that the camera filming the footage was actually placed on a tripod. The YouTube channel Really Haunted was created by a man named Lee after he claims to have started experiencing strange events in his home, and ever since he's captured these events on camera for his 200,000 subscribers to watch. In one of his videos, he claims to have found an old Ouija board in the house's attic, and in others he says that he's been attacked on multiple occasions by the evil spirit that lives in his house. But one video that was uploaded on the 6th of June in 2022 has been viewed by over 120,000 people, as it shows a strange interaction between Lee and the supposed spirit one night after he had fallen asleep. As the footage begins, we can see Lee asleep on a couch in his living room, and everything seems quiet. But this quickly changes when crashing sounds can be heard coming from somewhere else in the house, and Lee wakes up with a start, not knowing where the sounds are coming from. He gets up, picks up his cell phone, and walks around a corner to investigate, but seemingly finds nothing out of place, as the sounds have now completely stopped. But this is where things get really creepy. Just a few seconds later, Lee's Alexa device activates and delivers the chilling line, "She was my wife." Lee walks back into the room with a confused expression on his face, and after stopping in his tracks, he asks, "Who was your wife?" He steps back into the room, listening intently, and after getting no response, he repeats his question. This time, he gets an answer as the device responds, "You took her from me." And Lee looks directly into the camera before saying, "I didn't take anyone." He checks the time on his phone before telling the voice that they have the wrong person. But a few seconds later, the voice can be heard saying, "I found her here." He then asks the voice to tell him what her name is, to which the device responds, "My wife." He then says, "Your wife isn't here," and again asks for a name, but the only response he gets is the words "tee-hee," repeated over and over again, leaving him completely baffled. He's left with no choice but to switch the device off in hopes that he can still get a good night's sleep. He then walks back into the kitchen where the banging noises were coming from, and after he returns to the lounge, he explains that nothing's out of place in the kitchen. He then gets back under the covers before the footage comes to an end. Some viewers have pointed out other strange things in the video that Lee didn't notice, including a shadow that seemed to peek out at him from behind a wall, a dark orb that seemed to touch his nose moments before he scratched it, and another brighter orb that drops down from the ceiling at one point. Other commenters added that a dark shadow appeared behind Lee moments before he grabbed his shoulder, and they believe that this may be the cause for the chronic back pain that he said he'd been experiencing. After viewing the footage, some people were so unnerved by what happened that they vowed to never buy an Alexa device, since they didn't want to become the unknowing victims of a similar haunting. But this is where Lee's claims start to fall apart, as some viewers pointed out how easy it would be to replicate the results shown in this video. Many people were fooled by the footage because they were unaware of certain features that Alexa devices have to offer. One commenter noted that all Alexa speakers contain an app called Drop-In, which allows the user to dictate messages onto a cell phone, after which it's repeated by the Alexa device, making it seem as if a spirit was talking through the speaker unassisted. Others point to the device's speech-to-text feature that converts text that's been typed into a phone into speech, which is then delivered in Alexa's voice. And so they believe that Lee was using his phone to play the pre-typed messages, and that this is why he picked up his phone as soon as the strange activity started. Others think that someone in another room may have been speaking through their phone, making it seem as though Lee was communicating with his Alexa speaker. The art world can be very complicated and competitive, as only the most skilled artists usually gain the recognition that they strive for, and in some cases this only happens after the artist has passed away. But sometimes it takes years or even decades for a skilled artist to be recognized for their work, since some artworks are erroneously attributed to someone else, and it's only later that the mistake is rectified. One example of this is an Italian Renaissance artist named Sofonisba Agisola, who lived from 1535 to 1625. She became so well known during her prime that she was asked to train Elizabeth of Valois, who served as Queen of Spain, until she passed away in 1568. During this time, Anguissola served as the unofficial court painter, and hence many of her works were never attributed to her name. This is due to a fire that broke out in the Spanish court in the 1600s, and most of Anguissola's paintings were lost. A few were rescued though, but they were unsigned, so her talents went unrecognized for 300 years. It was only in the early part of the 1900s that this mistake was rectified, and Anguissola was finally recognized as the great artist that she was. Dutch painter Judith Leyster was another artist who had her work attributed to someone else during the 21st century. Due to their similar styles, Frans Hals, also a Dutch artist, was thought to be responsible for many of her works, as was her husband, Jan Molnar. It would take a further 200 years before Leyster's signature was discovered on a painting called The Happy Couple, and following that, many of her works were found. They're now considered to be masterpieces, and it's rumored that many more may exist that have not yet been discovered. It's hard to believe that such talented artists struggled to be recognized for the amazing works that they produced, but quite unbelievably, it isn't just obscure artists that have had their works misattributed to others, as is evidenced by the case of the Madonna della Rosa, a painting that depicts Mary, Joseph, John the Baptist as a baby, as well as baby Jesus. It's always been assumed that the work, which is displayed at the Prado Museum in Madrid, Spain, was created by the famous artist Raphael. But during the 19th century, some art scholars started raising doubts that the entire painting was created by Raphael, as certain sections seemed to indicate that he had help from someone else, but at the time there was no way of proving or disproving this theory. The first hint that Raphael wasn't the sole creator of this masterpiece lay in the detail of the Joseph figure's face. Many art experts felt that it seemed rushed and painted almost as an afterthought, which would have been very out of character for a painter of Raphael's ability. Some people suggested that an artist who was part of Raphael's workshop may have been responsible for this section of the painting, but until this could be proven, the painting was still being attributed to him. But another part of the painting caused some concern among those who studied Raphael's work. In the foreground, we can see a pink rose lying on a small wooden structure, and this too was thought to have been created by someone else's hand. It wouldn't be until 2023 that the painting could be studied via emerging AI technology, and it's believed that these vexing questions have now been answered, and it may just aid in solving similar mysteries in the future. The AI program that was used was developed by Hassan Ugail, who's a professor of visual computing at the University of Bradford in West Yorkshire, England, but doing so was no small feat. First, the AI algorithm had to be familiar with Raphael's style, and so it closely scrutinized 49 paintings that were known to have been created by him. Once this was done, the program could identify works created by Raphael with an astonishing 98% accuracy, something that would have seemed like witchcraft while the artist was still alive. Next, it scoured over the surface of the Madonna della Rosa, but it didn't just analyze the sections that were under dispute, but the entire painting, since there may have been other uncharacteristic sections that went unnoticed. This allowed it to become familiar with the colors used by the artist, the hues that these colors created, and the different types of brush strokes that are visible in the paint, a technique often used by professionals who are tasked with authenticating and attributing unsigned paintings to their rightful artists. This wasn't just a broadly executed task, but rather a near microscopic one that looked at every single detail of the work, no matter how small, in order to compare each section with the rest of the painting, and the results were quite surprising. In a paper that was published by Howell Edwards at the same university, among a few others, the results were revealed, and while some of its contents confirmed some theories, it also discounted others. Firstly, the AI program revealed the sections that had indeed originally been created by Raphael, those being the three figures of Mary, Jesus, and John the Baptist, as was suspected by art experts all along. But the figure of Joseph was found to have been added by someone else, though we may never know whether this was done by a member of his workshop or another unrelated artist altogether. It was also found that the bottom section that contains the rose was in fact painted by Raphael's hand, much to the surprise of those who believed that someone else was responsible. This isn't the first work of art attributed to Raphael that's undergone this complicated process. A painting called Haddo Madonna, which is on display at Haddo House in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, was acquired by the 4th Earl of Aberdeen, George Gordon, while he served as the country's prime minister until 1855. At the time, the piece was believed to be a genuine Raphael, but this has since been found to be inaccurate, as it was actually painted by a relatively unknown artist named Innocenzo da Imola, likely after Raphael passed away. It's now hoped that AI technology can be used to attribute even more masterpieces to their rightful artists in the future, since it can do so with such great accuracy while leaving the painting completely undamaged. When a person goes missing, their loved ones are usually the first to search for them before filing a police report, and in some fortunate cases, they're found pretty quickly and brought back home. But some missing person cases remain unsolved for years on end, with no clues as to what may have happened to them. But even then, there are cases that are eventually solved when that person is found alive and well. But not all of these types of reunions have a happy ending. When a man named Richard Hoagland mysteriously disappeared from Indianapolis in February of 1993, his wife Linda was left devastated as she had no idea what had happened to him. At the time, she described him as successful and a lot of fun to be with. But after being married for 11 years, he called her one day and stated that he'd been feeling ill and that he needed to go to the hospital. She asked him if he could wait a bit longer so that she could accompany him, but Richard stated that he didn't have time to wait and that he needed to go right away. But he didn't return home, and Linda phoned every hospital in the area, but it soon became obvious that he hadn't booked into any of them. He also left most of his possessions behind, including his clothing and passport. His car was eventually found where it had been abandoned at the Indianapolis International Airport, but investigators couldn't find any proof that he'd boarded a flight. At first, Linda was considered a suspect in Richard's disappearance, but when he still hadn't been found after 10 years, he was declared deceased. 13 years after that, she received a call from a detective who informed her that Richard was not only alive, but that he'd been taken into custody in Florida. It would then come to light that he had intentionally disappeared because, according to him, he'd been having issues with his family. He'd stolen the identity of a deceased man, Terry Szymanski, who was his landlord's son. He was eventually charged with identity fraud and sentenced to 2 years in prison. In another case that occurred in Pittsburgh in 1992, a woman named Patricia Kopta disappeared and all efforts to find her failed for more than 3 decades, with her family having no leads, other than the fact that she'd mentioned that she'd like to go on holiday to Puerto Rico, as she'd done before getting married. At one point during the marriage, Patricia quit her job due to stress migraines, and when she started a new one as an elevator operator, her behavior started to change for the worse. She told her family that she'd seen an angel while she was at work, and shortly after that, she was diagnosed as having delusions of grandeur, as well as showing signs of schizophrenia. Then, one night in 1992, she failed to return home. Her family searched everywhere for her, including Puerto Rico, but she was nowhere to be found. 7 years later, she was declared officially deceased, and her family tried to move on. But it would then come to light that she'd been found in southwest San Juan in Puerto Rico, where she'd been placed in a care home at the age of 86. Some missing person cases do have a happier ending, though. On the 26th of December 2011, Haley Wilson ran away from her father's house in Amarillo, Texas, leaving only a note behind in which she stated that he shouldn't try to find her. In a desperate attempt to find her, though, Haley's father, Ray, created a video that he uploaded to YouTube, asking anyone who knew where she was to come forward. In the video, he's seen holding up her photo and flashcards while a song, which he recorded with the band The Texas Heat, plays in the background. The card reads, "This is my daughter, Haley Faith Wilson. She ran away December 26th after 10 p.m. She's driving a 2003 Ford Focus station wagon, silver. This is the note she left me." He then holds up the note, which reads, "It's because you care and there's nothing going for me. I love you more than you'll know. You'll get my goodbye. All my loving I will send to you. Don't look for me, Dad. I know you'll go to the end of the world for me, but you won't find me. Please let me go." The next few flashcards explain that Haley left her cell phone at home and that she loves singing and playing the guitar. He then holds up a map that was found in her room with 3 points that have been marked in blue ink, namely Humboldt, Arcadia in California, as well as Bisbee in Arizona. The next card has a description of Haley written on it, followed by another that reads, "I just want her to be found safe. I love her very much. Will you pass this along and pray? Thank you." Ray is clearly very emotional in the video, and shortly after it was uploaded, it had been viewed more than 167,000 times. People started sharing it to other social media sites, including Twitter and Facebook, and before long, Haley's case was all over the internet. Given the locations that she had marked on the map, Ray believed that Haley might be in one of these towns, but it would later be brought to his attention that all 3 of these locations were known as hippie havens. He contacted all of her friends in case one of them had information on where she may have gone, but they all stated that they were as clueless as he was, and they had no idea that she'd been planning to run away from home at all. They all feared for her safety as they believed she was traveling alone, but all they could do was hope that a lead would come in that would lead them to her whereabouts. As for the details of Haley's disappearance, Ray stated that he and his wife, Amber, noticed she was gone when they woke up in the morning and found that she'd climbed through her bedroom window during the night. When he went outside, he noticed that her car was gone and that her room's window was open. He then went into her room and found that she'd taken her bedding, guitar, and a few other items with her. They then found the note and knew that they had to do something to find her. He added that they had some problems in the past, just as any parent does with their children, but that he never expected Haley to run away from home. He added that they just had a great Christmas and he didn't realize that anything was bothering her. But on the 3rd of January the following year, Ray posted an update to his Twitter account in which he stated that Haley had been found just outside Carlsbad and that she'd been returned home safely, and he thanked his fellow internet users for spreading the case far and wide. Social media has become an increasingly more important factor during criminal investigations, since investigators often find clues that lead them to the perpetrators, such as mentions made of certain areas, people they're known to associate with, or on rare occasions, outright confessions that they committed the crime. One such incident took place in 2014 in Florida, after an 18-year-old man named Redarius Glenn Collins and his accomplice, 27-year-old Marcus Terrell Parker, committed a burglary and, rather than keep quiet about it, decided to boast about their crime on social media. The burglary was committed in May of that year in Pinecrest, Florida. And while it's no mean feat to pull off such a daring crime, the robbers were soon dubbed the world's dumbest criminals, thanks to a video that they posted to Facebook. In the footage, Collins and Parker can be seen holding up $100 notes while bragging about how much money they'd stolen. It would later come to light that the three men, along with a third accomplice, broke into a house where they'd stolen a safe containing more than $500,000 worth of jewelry. Following that, they burglarized a second house and got away with more than $10,000 worth of jewelry, as well as a screwdriver that would later be used as evidence against them. Quite unbelievably, the men would sell their haul to a jewelry and watch shop, receiving a paltry $1,300 each for their efforts. Investigators soon caught wind of the video, and after viewing it, were able to connect the men to the store where they sold their ill-gotten loot, thanks to a bag that one of the robbers held up to the camera while filming the video. After being apprehended, Parker was charged with burglary, grand theft, and criminal mischief. Collins was hit with the same charges, but also faced an additional charge of dealing in stolen property. It isn't known whether the third suspect was ever tracked down. In another case that occurred in Pennsylvania in 2022, a popular YouTube couple, Johnson LaRose and Charlotte Fisher, who were known as Saucy and Honey, found themselves in legal trouble after attempting to stay in a Target store overnight. The couple arrived at the store about 30 minutes before it was set to close, and in the video, Fisher can be heard saying, "We're risking trespassing. I don't know what else can happen after that. If we get a fine or get arrested, I don't really know. I don't really care." They made sure to mention that they didn't intend to take anything from the store, and that they'd brought their own food for the night. They then hid in the store until it was closed and proceeded to walk around while filming. After an alarm was triggered at 3 a.m., police searched the building, but it would later come to light that it had been triggered by the couple as they left the store. But they would return again at 8 a.m. to finish filming their footage. When staff checked the security footage, they were surprised to see Fisher and LaRose walking around the store without a care in the world. But they were eventually apprehended and charged with third-degree criminal trespassing and conspiracy. They were released on $25,000 bail. In March of 2008, 23-year-old Rio Scott from Shrewsbury in England was left distraught after her car was stolen. Scott had been on a night out on Easter Sunday that year when she realized that someone had stolen her handbag, which contained the keys to her car, a Volkswagen Beetle. When she rushed to the area where she had parked her car outside of a nightclub called Liquid in Raven Meadows, she found that this had also been taken, and she immediately contacted the police. But she wasn't content waiting for tips to come in, and so she decided to create a Facebook page detailing the crime and the items that were stolen. She posted photos of her car and urged anyone who spotted it to contact the police immediately. She added that some of her children's belongings were in the car and that she desperately wanted them back. She also stated that the car had a personalized license plate, which would make it easier to spot, and it didn't take long for her efforts to pay off. Police officers had made inquiries in the area, but they were unable to secure any leads and failed to find the vehicle. But after posting to Facebook, Rio was contacted by a fellow Facebook user who stated that she'd seen the car parked in a parking lot in Telford where she lives, specifically at the end of Stonebridge Close in an area called the Aqueduct. It would turn out that the woman who contacted Rio was a friend of a friend who just happened to see her post on Facebook and by coincidence had taken a mental note of the car when she drove past it earlier that day. Rio then informed the police who traveled to the area and were finally able to locate the car, which was then returned to its rightful owner. Unfortunately, the culprit who stole it was never tracked down, but officers were grateful for the story being spread around on social media, and later stated that the car likely would have never been found if it wasn't for Rio's Facebook post. The power of social media should not be underestimated when it comes to cases such as this, since community members have the chance to make a difference in their areas by alerting their neighbors to any untoward activity that's been noticed. Illegal logging has been a huge concern for many decades, as areas such as Brazil and Romania have seen a huge surge in the illegal trade, causing widespread devastation to their rainforests. In 2022, it was found that Brazil had suffered an increased 400% in deforestation in just 8 years, despite strict laws being put into place against illegal logging. But since it's very hard to track these criminals, not many have been apprehended, and the threat remains very real today. This is where the use of technology comes in, as many people believe the use of satellite imagery could help identify areas where illegal loggers are operating, and hopefully bring a decrease in the amount of trees that are lost every year. It's easy to see why some criminals decide to turn to illegal logging as a career, since it's a very lucrative trade. It's now considered to be the most profitable environmental crime in the world, resulting in up to $152 billion worth of trees being lost each year. But it includes far more than just chopping trees down and exporting them. The trade is riddled with corruption, tax evasion, bribery, and fraud, and in many cases, entire communities have been threatened with violence if they were to contact the authorities. While those who profit from this practice are content with destroying forests for money, it leaves a lasting and devastating effect not only on the surrounding communities, but our planet as a whole, as deforestation is one of the leading causes of global warming. It also has a negative impact on the economy, since legal logging companies aren't able to compete with the low prices of timber produced by these criminals. Then there's the effect that it has on indigenous wildlife. Many species have been driven to the brink of extinction by the trade, since their homes are uprooted and the areas where they hunt for and gather food have been all but destroyed, leaving them no choice but to either relocate or starve. Quite unbelievably, illegal logging is responsible for up to 90% of forestry activity on our planet, and hence it's vital that this number be brought down as low as possible, and the person responsible be brought to task for the damage that they've caused. Many people believe that Google Earth may just be the right tool for getting this done, since it's been helpful in solving other cases in the past. There have been reports of missing people who were found decades after they vanished with the use of Google Earth, when their cars were spotted submerged in large bodies of water, and in some cases ponds that were overlooked during the initial investigations. The point here is that an aerial view of these forests could provide helpful clues as to where illegal logging is being carried out, and authorities can then take steps toward it being stopped for good. This is already being implemented by the National Police in the Philippines, particularly in the Laguna area where illegal logging has been a problem for a very long time. It's been reported that the trade is responsible not only for massive financial losses in the country, but that it's caused landslides as well as flash floods in the Laguna area, sometimes resulting in the loss of innocent lives. Gilbert Cruz, a senior superintendent with the National Philippines Police, has stated that Google Earth has been instrumental in eradicating illegal logging in 9 towns. Explaining how the service is used, Cruz stated that white dots will appear on the map in areas where illegal logging is taking place, and it's then much easier for authorities to track those who are responsible and for their operations to be shut down for good. He added that since they started using this technique to identify hotspots, they've arrested 12 people who were found to be involved in the trade. They've also seized over 280,000 feet of wood that was set to be shipped abroad for profit, and authorities in the country have dismantled 8 illegal depots from where these operations were being run. Whereas these crimes were only discovered after the illegally obtained wood had already been distributed in the past, it's now possible for the authorities to strike before this is done, and it's believed that this will have a massive impact since illegal logging may just be completely eradicated in the future. Another example of this is the use of Google Earth in Indonesia, where illegal logging has had a devastating effect, causing landslides and floods in the winter and unbearable droughts in the summer months. Here, it was found that no thorough policing was being carried out, allowing illegal loggers to carry out their trade at will, but at the cost of those who lived in the surrounding areas. But this plan also has certain challenges, since tropical countries such as Indonesia usually produce satellite images that are obscured by cloud cover, and hence it's hard to track areas where illegal logging is being carried out. This problem has been solved though, thanks to Google Earth's GEE engine, which uses the Sentinel-1 satellite constellation to monitor not only forests, but also oceans and other areas. It has the ability to see through cloud cover, and hence makes it possible for forested areas to be monitored closely. If there's a notable change in the forest's shape or size, it's likely being caused by illegal logging, and that area can then be investigated much faster than it would have been just a few years ago. The GEE platform also includes a random forest classification algorithm that detects changes in the monitored forests. In 2021 alone, it detected 3,651 potential areas of interest that were then investigated, proving that it is a very useful tool in combating this illegal trade. Google Earth has also been responsible for pointing out discrepancies in reporting on conditions of important forests. The chief minister of an area called Sarawak in Malaysian Borneo has publicly claimed that 70% of the area's forests are healthy and undamaged. But thanks to Google Earth imagery, this was found to be false, as it's been revealed that up to 90% of the forests have been lost to illegal logging. Images of the area are not only showing the devastation that's been caused, but they also reveal that logging roads are used by these loggers, making it easier to track their movements and to apprehend them while they're in the act. But this has revealed a worrying trend among some governments of the world, since it's been found that these reports are often intentionally skewed, leading many people to believe that the illegal logging industry is much larger than previously believed, since certain governments have a hand in its practice. This has also led to local leaders coming under fire by people who believe that they're being intentionally deceitful. This came after it was discovered that members of the government and their own families own millions of dollars worth of properties overseas. It was found that they acquired these properties illegally, and they're likely linked to the interest in the country's forestry sector, though the leaders denied any wrongdoing despite refusing an independent assessment of the area's forests. It's come to light that they've not allowed any assessment of the forests since 1991, when the International Tropical Timber Association carried out just such a study, and found that there were many issues that needed to be addressed. The good news is that this technology is continually improving, and it'll make it much harder for these reports to be faked. The quality of images will only become better in years to come. Forests will be monitored more closely, and it'll even be possible for members of the public to report on areas where they believe illegal logging is taking place. It's also hoped that this technology will eventually make a marked difference all around the world, and that the illegal logging trade will be severely affected, though it'll likely never be fully eliminated. Not many people are aware of the existence of Geofence warrants, which allow investigators access to a database that contains any active mobile devices within a specified geofence area. This is often used in missing person cases. For clarification, a geofence is a virtual area in which mobile software is triggered as soon as it enters that area. An example of this is a type of digital marketing where a business can identify specific mobile users within a certain area, and they can send them advertisements to their mobile devices. But this technology is not only used to find missing people, as is evidenced by a case from 2017 in which a 30-year-old woman who's not been named, but is being referred to simply as MD, was carjacked and kidnapped. On the 16th of that year, the woman, who worked as a healthcare professional, had just finished her shift at a hospital, and she was on her way home in her car at around 2 a.m. At one point, she stopped at a highway exit and was shocked when a man whom she'd never seen before suddenly jumped into her car through an open window and forced her to drive away under the threat of violence, since he had a hammer and a sharp blade with him. After driving a short distance, he told her to pull over to the side of the road where a dark-colored pickup truck was waiting. He told her to get out of her car and forced her into the truck where the man's accomplice was waiting, and she had no choice but to comply since she feared for her life. As the second man drove on, MD was robbed and assaulted, but a short while later, the truck was stopped by the side of the road, and to her surprise, she was released. She managed to make her way to a truck stop just outside Milwaukee at 3 a.m. And here, she asked a driver who was buying gas if she could use his cell phone, which she was more than happy to do. She called 911 and reported what had just happened, after which she was able to make a full report with the police. But everyone involved knew that there wasn't much chance of the culprits being tracked down, since she didn't get a good look at the vehicle and had no idea who they were. But in an effort to solve the case, investigators accompanied the woman, retracing the route that the kidnappers took. They also scoured CCTV surveillance footage in these areas, but were unable to locate the culprits. Fingerprints were taken of inside the car, but these also failed to produce any results. She was able to describe the carjacker, but this didn't aid in finding him, and it seemed that the two men would get away with their crime. That is, until one detective decided to try something out of the ordinary. The two men had stolen her cell phone, but investigators were unable to track it, since the criminals had already switched it off by this point. But one detail of the kidnapping stood out to Detective Eric Drager, and he decided to follow up on it. While the woman was being held captive in the pickup truck, she noticed that one of the kidnappers was using a Samsung Galaxy cell phone, since she could see the light from its screen illuminating the inside of the vehicle. She then bravely managed to take a sneak peek at his screen and realized that he was using Google Maps, probably following directions in an area where they were unfamiliar with, as most of us have done before. She also remembered that the app was still running when she was told to get out of the truck. Drager was very familiar with cell phone tower dumps, since he'd been involved in technologically advanced investigations in the past. He'd also made use of cell tower dumps during some of his investigations, which allowed him to see which phones were in a certain area when a crime was carried out. This often yields positive results, as these phones can then be traced back to their owners and they can be questioned or taken into custody. But using this technology would be very costly and didn't always produce the desired results. Instead, he decided to try another route after he'd caught wind of a technique that had been suggested by other investigators while he was attending a conference in which Google could provide location data for a specific mobile device such as a tablet or a cell phone. Not only would this be a very useful tool, but it could be highly accurate too. So he decided to suggest the idea to his supervisor. Since he had never done this before, he was unsure whether it would work, but his supervisor cleared his request since another woman from Kenosha had reported that she'd been followed by two men in a dark-colored pickup truck just hours before MD was abducted, and there was a good chance they would repeat the crime. In that incident, the driver of the pickup truck tried to force her car off the road, and when she came to a stop, one of the men approached her car with a baseball bat in his hands, prompting her to flee at high speed. It was highly probable that these were the same two men who abducted MD, and Drager was aware of the fact that any Android operating system user could only access Google services when their phone was linked to a Google account. He also knew that Google apps, such as Google Maps, collected users' location data when using these apps. So he contacted a district attorney to ask for a Geofence warrant to be issued about 12 hours after the abduction had taken place. He then met with the attorney and a judge to explain the situation, after which the judge agreed to issue the search warrant. He then emailed a copy of the warrant to Google, making sure to mention that it was in connection with a case that had to be solved as quickly as possible. A few days later, employees from Google contacted Drager and revealed that they'd looked at cell phone data from the spot where MD was abducted, a bar where her credit card was used after it was stolen, and areas where the truck was known to have traveled during the kidnapping. This resulted in just one phone being pinpointed, since it was present in all of those areas at the times in question. Not only was Google able to provide Drager with the phone number, but they also knew the phone owner's name, a 28-year-old man named Jose Arevalo Vieira, who'd already served time in jail for wrongful imprisonment. His phone was then tracked by his service provider, and Drager could watch in real time as Arevalo Vieira was driving home from work. He was pulled over in Louisville, Kentucky on the 20th of June and taken into custody, and his accomplice, Gabriel Arias Martinez, was arrested shortly after. One of the men was sentenced to more than 100 years in prison, while the other received a sentence of 25 years behind bars, with an added 15 years of extended supervision. Private property thefts are some of the most common unsolved crimes. There's often little evidence left behind, and unless the stolen property shows up somewhere, it's often never recovered. So when the Soanes family from Derbyshire discovered their caravan had been stolen in June of 2009, there was little hope of ever catching the criminal responsible. The crime would have remained unsolved were it not for an internet clue that helped crack the case. The theft took place on June 5, 2009. Rebecca Soanes was an exam supervisor, and it was about midway through the yearly summer exam program. She left for work that morning, leaving the house empty. Her husband, a surveyor, and her 2 children had already left for work and school. When Rebecca returned home at 2 p.m., the 12,000-pound caravan that was in their front driveway was missing. The caravan had been fitted with an anti-theft alarm system and wheel clamps, but that hadn't been enough to stop the thief. The wheel clamps had been left behind. The police were called to investigate the crime. The criminal investigation revealed a neighbor had seen an unfamiliar man parked in front of the Soanes' home just 10 minutes after Rebecca left for work. The neighbor had thought it was a family friend, so had said nothing. A forensic examination of the wheel clamps also took place, but provided no clues as to who could have left it behind. The case went cold. None of the neighbors had any cameras installed, and it was thought that the case would never be solved. But someone else entirely had a camera on the street. Just as the thief was preparing to get away with the caravan, a Google Street View car was going past the house. The car took photos for the Street View service, including one of the thief and his 4x4 outside of the Soanes' home. It was months later when this piece of evidence was discovered. The Soanes' son was looking at their house on Google Street View when he came across the image. The car's license plate was blurred, but there was a clear image of the man. The police looked at the case again and turned to Google to try to get the license plate number. The family thought the case would be easily solved, but getting the number from Google was difficult. The company admitted that it had unblurred the image and said in a statement that it cooperated with police, but that didn't seem to be the case. The image was published in hopes that the public might be able to identify the man. In 2012, a suspect was finally arrested, and the case of the missing caravan was solved. Today, it can often seem that anything and everything is connected to the internet. That can have some downsides, but when an item is stolen, the fact it's connected to the internet can be a thing that solves the case. That was the case when Jesse McPherson had his Xbox stolen in March of 2008. Jesse had been away on a work trip when the theft took place. When he returned on March 12th, his girlfriend told him that their house had been burgled. The thief had ripped the TV from the wall and had taken his Xbox and her Apple PowerBook. The only reason the thief hadn't taken more was because Jesse's roommate was home, and they had scared the thief away. Police had dusted for fingerprints at the house, but there were few clues to go on. Jesse decided to investigate the crime himself. He had the serial numbers for the items that were stolen and went to a pawn shop to see if anyone had tried to sell them. Sure enough, one of the employees recognized the laptop. Someone had tried to sell it, but the store hadn't taken the item. The thief was caught on CCTV, and the store gave Jesse the image. Even with the picture of the person with his laptop, police were still little help. By this point, Jesse was ready to move on and thought he would never get his items back. Friends and work colleagues came together to buy him a new Xbox. But when he logged into his Xbox Live account, he had a message that would finally solve the case. The message was from an individual who claimed to have his Xbox and wanted $200 for its return. Now Jesse posted the voice message, the user's Xbox account information, and the photo from the store onto his blog to try to track down the items. The blog post made its way to a news aggregator, and soon the post had gone viral. Internet sleuths made a wiki site dedicated to tracking down the criminals responsible. They located the Xbox user's MySpace and YouTube accounts, and bombarded him with messages. The new owner of the Xbox eventually contacted the police and sent the Xbox back to Jesse. It was a different individual to the man at the store. He had apparently only bought the stolen Xbox and wasn't the thief himself. In January of 2009, the man from the store showed up at Jesse's house with the laptop. He also claimed to not be the thief, but had bought the laptop from the actual thief. He had seen his photo circulating online and didn't want the same harassment as the Xbox buyer. In the final update, Jesse stated that police were close to catching the actual thief, but he now had 2 of the 3 items back and felt happy with the results the internet investigation had brought. In 2020, Snapchat was used to set up a robbery that quickly turned into something even more disturbing. But it was also then used by police to solve the crime. At 6:15 p.m. on November 25th, police received calls from shoppers at a grocery store in Point Loma, San Diego. A car had just crashed into a barrier after a series of loud bangs had come from inside. Police found the driver had suffered from bullet wounds. This was Eduardo Salguero. 2 other men who'd been in the car had fled the scene. Police quickly learned that Eduardo had arranged to meet up with 2 men on Snapchat in the parking lot. A sale had been made, though police never revealed if Eduardo was buying or selling the item that had been bought via the app. Eduardo brought a friend with him to the parking lot. Witnesses saw 2 men wearing dark clothing get into the back of Eduardo's car. Eduardo's friend revealed that the 2 men had quickly revealed that they had weapons and threatened to take their lives if they didn't hand over what money they had. Eduardo's friend fled the car. The criminals attacked him as he fled, but thankfully he wasn't struck. Eduardo was struck in the back, but managed to get the car into drive and tried to escape before hitting a wall. The 2 attackers were still in the car at this point and suffered serious wounds in the crash, but managed to escape. Eduardo passed away at the local hospital. It didn't take police long to find the men that they were looking for. In some ways, the internet was what triggered the crime, but the internet also solved the case. It's not clear what led police to the Snapchat account of Angel Garcia, but once they were there, they discovered he was selling a weapon. The weapon had no serial numbers, which made it difficult to trace, but police would later confirm it was the weapon used to take Eduardo's life. Garcia was arrested in early December, but he hadn't been working alone. Further digging revealed the Snapchat message was actually sent from a phone belonging to Armando Sylvester Alvarado. The 2 men matched the description of the criminals that had gotten into Eduardo's car in the grocery store parking lot. He was arrested 2 weeks after Garcia, and both were ordered to stand trial. Police used Snapchat and Google search history to get to the bottom of a truly disturbing crime that took place in Wisconsin in 2021. When Bart and Krista Halderson were reported missing, nobody expected the man reporting them missing to be responsible. Bart and Krista seemed to be living a good life. They had 2 adult sons. Their eldest worked in tech, and their younger son, Chandler, was at college. He lived at home but had a job at SpaceX lined up. He also had previously worked for a police scuba diving team and for the American Insurance Company. So Bart was surprised when he learned his son hadn't been attending classes for more than a semester. He arranged a meeting for himself and Chandler at the university to see what was going on. But before the meeting could take place, Bart and his wife mysteriously disappeared. It was Krista's coworker who first noticed that she was missing. When she didn't show up for work on July 2nd, he tried to get in contact with her. When that didn't work, he contacted Chandler. Chandler had told him that his parents had gone to their cabin in Langlade County for the 4th of July weekend. A couple he didn't recognize had picked them up. They also had taken tools to do some emergency boiler repairs while they were there. When the holiday came and went and there was still no sign of the couple, Krista's coworker urged Chandler to contact the police. The couple were reported missing on July 7th. Parts of his story didn't add up. For example, he said they were going to a parade when no such parade existed. The next day, Chandler was arrested for giving false information. As part of the investigation, police looked at Chandler's search history for the past week. He had searched for woman's body found in Wisconsin and body found in Wisconsin. Meanwhile, witnesses had reported seeing him at a farm on July 1st. When police searched the farm, they found human remains. The remains were identified as Bart Halderson. Chandler's girlfriend also came forward to help the police. Chandler had cheated on her in the past, and now she used Snapchat's location feature to keep track of it. On July 3rd, she had spotted him at a remote location near the Wisconsin River. She thought it was strange, so took a screenshot of the map. When police went to the location, they found Krista's remains. It turned out Chandler had dropped out of college and was unemployed. The stories about his jobs and the future job at SpaceX were all lies. When his father had found out that he hadn't been to class, he decided to take matters into his own hands, but it was his own internet activity that gave him away. When someone took the life of Daisy Dalao outside of her apartment in February of 2021, her friends turned to social media to try to solve the case. It wasn't so much a whodunit. They were pretty sure they knew who the criminal was, but where he was the unsolved mystery. Daisy was 19 years old in 2021. She was at college and wanted to be a makeup and tattoo artist when she graduated. She lived in Compton, Los Angeles with her brother, mother, and grandfather. She also had a boyfriend, Victor Solas, who was 6 years her senior. The age gap was obviously worrying, but more concerning were the attacks. Solas physically attacked Daisy multiple times. On 2 occasions, her brother had to drag him off. Daisy's mother believed her daughter was embarrassed about the attacks and would not report him to the police, even when she needed stitches after one of the attacks. In early 2021, Daisy finally broke up with Solas, something her mother was happy about, but it seemed he wasn't happy with their relationship ending. Late on the evening of February 22nd, Daisy was watching TV with her mother when she received a text from Solas. He said he had something for her. Daisy told her mother that she would be right back. Daisy still wasn't back by the time her mother went to bed. When her mother found Daisy's bed hadn't been slept in, she assumed her daughter had gotten back together with Solas and had spent the night with him. Daisy's mother was at work when their apartment manager found Daisy's body in an alley at the side of the building. Daisy's family immediately told police about Solas. They suspected him straight away. CCTV footage from the apartment building also seemed to confirm this. It showed someone believed to be Solas dragging something out to where Daisy's body was found. But police couldn't be certain that it was him, and they had no idea where Solas was. The investigation stalled. There was little news coverage and months went by without any answers. 3 months after the crime took place, Daisy's friends shared her story on social media. TikTok videos were put out and an Instagram page was set up for Solas. The public sent many tips. There were people who claimed to know Solas's family and where they lived. According to police, none of those tips worked out. But on July 1st, 2021, someone sent a video that finally solved the case. It was a short video filmed on a mobile phone at a bar in Mexico. The man in the video had been working there for several weeks and seemed relaxed, with a cigarette and he was drinking. He had dyed his hair, but Daisy's family recognized him instantly as Solas. At the same time, someone had sent a tip placing Solas at that bar to police. He was arrested and brought back to the US. In May of 2022, he was found guilty of taking Daisy's life and was handed a sentence of 26 years to life in prison. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.